3 months earlier, I stood in the driveway of our new home, watching the moving truck back into position. The suburban neighborhood of Oakwood Estates represented everything I had hoped for: a safe environment for my son, good schools nearby, and most importantly, stability. After 15 years commanding the regional SWAT negotiation unit, I understood the value of having a peaceful home base. My son Tyler required round-the-clock care. A rare neuromuscular condition had gradually weakened his respiratory muscles over the past 4 years, eventually necessitating full-time ventilator support. At 13, he remained bright, engaged, and determined despite his physical limitations. His mind remained sharp as ever, even as his body required technological assistance for the most basic function of breathing. The medical equipment company arrived shortly after the movers. I directed them to the downstairs bedroom we had converted specifically for Tyler. The ventilator, backup batteries, monitoring equipment, and emergency generator all required proper installation. The technician explained the importance of the dedicated power line they would install. The dedicated circuit provides clean, consistent power to the ventilator, he explained, showing me the special connection points. We will run this line directly to your exterior power box. This setup eliminates the risk of power fluctuations that could damage the equipment. I nodded, having researched everything extensively. And the backup systems. Primary battery backup gives you 45 minutes. The emergency generator provides 8 hours at full capacity. Together with your monitoring system, this creates multiple layers of protection. The following week, I attended my first homeowners association meeting, bringing documentation about our medical accommodations. The association president, Barbara Thompson, greeted newcomers with practiced cordiality that did not reach her eyes. She stood at average height but projected authority through perfect posture and a perpetual expression of evaluation. "We welcome you to Oakwood Estates," Barbara announced to the room, her voice carrying the artificial warmth of rehearsed customer service. "But we must remind all residents that our covenant agreements maintain property values through consistent aesthetic standards." I approached her after the meeting, documentation in hand. I wanted to introduce myself and inform the board about some necessary medical accommodations for my son. Barbara glanced at my papers without taking them. "Any exterior modifications require prior approval. No exceptions." "These are medical necessities," I explained calmly, using the same measured tone that had talked armed suspects through surrendering weapons. "My son requires constant ventilator support to breathe." Her eyes narrowed at the mention of equipment. "Medical hardships are unfortunate, but they do not exempt properties from community standards. Submit the proper forms and the board will consider your request." I noticed several board members exchanging glances behind her. One woman looked sympathetic but remained silent. "The medical equipment company has already installed the necessary power connections," I explained. "I have all the documentation from his doctors and the equipment provider." Barbara straightened her jacket. "Unauthorized modifications are subject to fines. Submit the retroactive request forms by Friday." She turned away before I could respond. That night, I sat beside Tyler's bed, monitoring his breathing as I completed the extensive HOA documentation. The soft, rhythmic sound of the ventilator provided background to my thoughts. In my professional life, I negotiated with armed suspects, talked down potential jumpers, and managed hostage situations. I resolved conflicts where lives hung in the balance. Surely I could navigate one overzealous HOA president. As I watched Tyler sleep, his chest rising and falling with mechanical assistance, I had no idea that Barbara Thompson would soon become a greater threat to my son's life than any armed suspect I had ever faced. The first violation notice appeared on our door 3 days after moving in. Unapproved medical equipment visible from street, $150 fine. I photographed the notice, then carefully documented our current setup. The exterior power connection was discreetly installed beside the utility meters, painted to match the house exterior. Only someone specifically looking for it would notice anything unusual. I drafted a response letter attaching the medical necessity documentation and submitted it to the HOA office. The response came back within 48 hours. Request for exemption denied. Compliance required within 7 days. 2 days later, a second violation arrived. Unauthorized generator installation, $250 fine. This referred to the emergency backup generator that had been professionally installed behind our privacy fence, completely invisible from the street. I decided direct communication might resolve the situation. I called Barbara and requested a meeting, emphasizing the critical nature of the equipment. "I have time tomorrow at 4:00, she stated without warmth. "Bring all relevant documentation." The next afternoon, I arrived at her home office precisely on time. Barbara Thompson's house stood as a monument to suburban perfection: manicured landscaping, pristine exterior, and coordinated seasonal decorations adorning the porch. "These accommodations are medically necessary," I explained, spreading the documentation across her desk. "The equipment sustains my son's life. The backup generator activates automatically if power fails, ensuring his ventilator continues functioning." Barbara examined the papers with detached interest. "Your personal circumstances, while unfortunate, do not supersede community standards. The visible power connection diminishes aesthetic uniformity of the neighborhood." "The connection is barely noticeable," I countered, maintaining professional composure. "It was installed by medical professionals according to safety guidelines." "Perhaps you should have researched community guidelines before purchasing in Oakwood Estates," Barbara responded. "Our covenants are quite clear regarding exterior modifications." I took a deep breath, employing the same calming techniques I taught my negotiation team. "I understand your concerns about neighborhood aesthetics. However, this equipment is literally keeping my son alive. Surely there must be reasonable accommodation under the Americans with Disabilities Act." Her expression hardened at the mention of legal considerations. "Submit a formal appeal if you wish. The board will review it at next month's meeting." Her tone made clear what the outcome would be. Over the next 3 weeks, violation notices accumulated. Each focused on some aspect of our medical setup: the exterior power connection, backup generator noise potential, equipment visibility through windows. Each carried increasing fines. I documented everything meticulously, creating a chronological record of what was quickly becoming targeted harassment. My professional training proved valuable as I maintained detailed evidence of every interaction, photographed each notice, and recorded all conversations with Barbara. The monthly HOA newsletter arrived, announcing Barbara had been elected association president following the previous president's sudden resignation. The newsletter prominently featured a section on maintaining community standards that seemed written specifically about our situation without naming us directly. The following day, Barbara appeared at my door unannounced, clipboard in hand. "Our inspection committee has identified additional violations," she stated without greeting. "Your continued noncompliance is becoming problematic." "These are not violations," I responded firmly. They are medically necessary accommodations protected under federal law. Barbara's eyes narrowed. The board has authority to enforce community standards. Noncompliance has consequences beyond financial penalties. Continued violations can result in liens against your property or even forced compliance measures. The threat hung in the air between us. My negotiator training immediately recognized the escalation tactics, vague threats designed to intimidate rather than resolve. "Are you threatening actions against medical equipment that keeps my son alive?" I asked directly, maintaining eye contact. Barbara stepped back slightly. "I am informing you of standard HOA procedures for persistent violations. Submit your appeal if you wish, but I would recommend compliance instead." She turned and walked away before I could respond. That evening, I called a colleague at the district attorney's office, summarizing the situation without mentioning my professional position. His advice confirmed my suspicions. This was beyond normal HOA overreach. I began preparations for both legal defense and security measures. After 15 years handling crisis situations, I recognized the warning signs of someone escalating toward drastic action. Tyler noticed my concern as I checked his equipment that night. "Everything okay, Dad?" he asked, his voice soft through the breathing mask. "Just some neighborhood politics," I assured him, adjusting his blanket. "Nothing for you to worry about." I had no idea how wrong I was. The certified letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, the official HOA letterhead stamped with "Final Notice" in bold red letters. I opened it at the kitchen table, scanning the contents with growing disbelief. The demands had escalated beyond reasonable measures. All medical equipment must be relocated to interior rooms with no external visibility. External power connections must be removed and rerouted through standard residential circuits. Emergency generator must be removed from proper tie as it constitutes an unapproved structure and potential noise violation. Failure to comply within 14 days will result in maximum penalties of $500 per day per violation. I placed the letter down carefully, controlling my breathing the way I taught hostage negotiators to manage stress during crisis communications. The demands were impossible to meet without endangering Tyler. His medical equipment required specific power configurations. Moving to interior rooms would prevent emergency responders from quickly accessing him. Removing the dedicated power line would create dangerous vulnerability to power surges. I called Dr. Ramirez, Tyler's pulmonologist, who immediately offered to provide additional documentation. "This is dangerous interference with medical care," she stated firmly. "I will write a comprehensive letter explaining why these accommodations cannot be modified without creating significant risk." The HOA board meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening. I arrived early, medical documentation organized in a professional portfolio. The meeting room at the community center gradually filled with neighbors, most avoiding eye contact. Barbara sat at the center of the board table, flanked by 4 other members. "The board recognizes Commander Jackson," Barbara announced when my appeal came up on the agenda, deliberately using my professional title with subtle mockery in her tone. "You have 5 minutes to present your case." I approached the podium, placing my documentation on the surface. "Thank you. As you know, my son requires constant ventilator support due to his medical condition. The equipment configurations at our home are not aesthetic choices but medical necessities installed according to healthcare provider specifications." I methodically presented the documentation from Tyler's doctors, the equipment manufacturer, and the relevant ADA guidelines. Several neighbors nodded in understanding as I explained the critical nature of the power setup. The demands in this final notice would create serious medical risk, I concluded. I am requesting reasonable accommodation under federal disability law. Barbara smiled thinly when I finished. Thank you for your presentation. Are there any questions from the board? Silence filled the room. The board members glanced at Barbara, then down at their papers. Since there are no questions, we will proceed to vote on the appeal, Barbara continued. All in favor of upholding the violation notices and compliance requirements. 4 hands raised immediately. Only one board member, an elderly woman named Margaret, hesitated before slowly raising her hand, avoiding my gaze. The appeal is denied unanimously, Barbara announced with finality. Next agenda item. I remained standing. May I ask what specific aesthetic concern justifies endangering the life of a child? The room fell silent. Barbara's expression hardened. This meeting follows Robert's Rules of Order. Your time has concluded. Please be seated or you will be asked to leave. The following day, I contacted Medical Support Systems, the company that installed Tyler's equipment. Their technician, Jason, arrived that afternoon to evaluate our setup. These configurations are exactly as they should be, he confirmed after inspection. The dedicated circuit is essential for preventing power fluctuations that could damage the ventilator. The backup systems are properly installed according to medical standards. Could we relocate everything to interior rooms as requested? I asked. Jason shook his head emphatically. Absolutely not recommended. Emergency responders need quick access in case of equipment failure. Moving everything inside creates dangerous delays. Plus, the ventilator needs specific wiring that standard residential circuits cannot safely provide. He documented his assessment, providing an official letter stating that the modifications demanded by the HOA would create substantial and potentially life-threatening risk to my son. That evening, while reviewing neighborhood social media groups, I discovered an interesting post. An anonymous complaint had been filed specifically mentioning unsightly medical equipment and cables damaging neighborhood aesthetic. Though the post had been deleted quickly, I had captured a screenshot. The phrasing matched Barbara's exact words from our meetings. The next morning, I visited the county record's office. After an hour of research, I located the original complaint form that had initiated the violation notices. Though filed anonymously, the handwriting matched Barbara's signature from HOA documentation. The complaint specifically mentioned eyesore power cables and unacceptable equipment visibility from the street. As I drove home, my phone rang. It was Margaret, the hesitant board member. I cannot speak long, she said quietly, but you should know this is personal for Barbara. She fought against allowing a group HOA for disabled adults in her previous neighborhood. When she lost that fight, she moved here. She considers any visible accommodation a threat to property values. Thank you for telling me, I responded. This information helps. That night, I installed additional security cameras covering all entry points to our property, with special focus on the medical power connections and generator. My professional instincts warned me that Barbara was building towards something more than bureaucratic harassment. After 15 years reading threat assessments, I recognized the pattern of escalation. I had no idea how quickly my concerns would be validated. The incident occurred on a Wednesday afternoon. I had just finished a 4-hour negotiation training session at headquarters when my phone alerted me to the emergency alarm at home. The monitoring system showed power failure to the main ventilator system, with automatic battery backup engagement. I called our home health nurse immediately. "Maria, what is happening?" "The power just cut out completely," she responded, her voice professionally calm despite the circumstances. "The ventilator switched to battery backup automatically. Tyler is stable, but the system shows 43 minutes of battery remaining. I have already started emergency protocols." "Activate the generator manually," I instructed, already running to my vehicle. "I will be there in 12 minutes." The drive home remains a blur in my memory. I maintained exactly 5 miles above the speed limit, fast enough to reduce travel time without risking being stopped. My emergency lights flashed from my dashboard, a privilege of my position that I had never before used for personal reasons. I arrived home in 10 minutes, pulling into the driveway as Maria emerged from the side of the house. "The generator is not engaging properly," she reported. "I followed all emergency procedures, but something is interfering with the connection." I rushed inside, checking Tyler first. He lay in bed, eyes wide but calm, trained to remain still during emergencies to conserve oxygen. The ventilator display showed 32 minutes of battery remaining. "Everything will be fine," I assured him with the steady confidence that had talked countless people through crisis situations. "Just another power hiccup." I moved quickly to the utility room, examining the backup systems. The generator appeared functional but was not receiving the signal to engage. I manually overrode the system, and the generator hummed to life. The ventilator switched from battery to generator power, restoring normal operation. With Tyler stabilized, I went outside to investigate the power failure. The dedicated medical line entered our house near the utility meters, clearly marked with medical alert signage. The cable now hung loosely, cleanly severed near the connection point. This was not weather damage or accident. The cut was precise, deliberate. I immediately documented the damage with my phone, taking multiple photographs from different angles. The clean cut indicated garden shears or similar cutting tool. This was intentional sabotage of medical equipment. "Maria, please stay with Tyler," I instructed, returning inside. "I need to check our security footage." Our security system stored footage on both cloud servers and local backup. I accessed the recordings from earlier that afternoon, scanning backward from the power failure alert. At 2:17 p.m., the exterior camera captured Barbara Thompson approaching our utility area, looking carefully in both directions before proceeding. She wore gardening gloves and carried large pruning shears. The footage clearly showed her examining the power connections, locating the dedicated medical line with its clear medical equipment, "Do not disconnect" labeling. Without hesitation, she positioned the shears around the cable and cut through it with deliberate force. She then quickly departed through the side yard. I watched the recording 3 times, my professional training keeping my emotional response in check. This was not impulsive action, but premeditated sabotage of life-sustaining medical equipment. The intentional nature of the act, combined with prior documented threats and awareness of medical dependency, elevated this to attempted homicide. I called 911, identifying myself by name and position. "This is Commander Jackson with Regional SWAT. I need to report deliberate sabotage of medical equipment at my residence. The suspect has been captured on security footage cutting the power line to my son's ventilator. I need officers dispatched immediately." While waiting for patrol units, I contacted my department's technical unit, requesting immediate preservation of all security footage. I then called our department legal counsel, briefly explaining the situation. I am sending you security footage showing deliberate cutting of a clearly marked medical power line. The suspect was fully where this line powered life support equipment. I need guidance on appropriate charges. 2 patrol officers arrived within minutes. I recognized Officer Daniels from training sessions I had conducted the previous year. Commander Jackson, he greeted me with surprise. Dispatch mentioned medical equipment sabotage, but I had no idea it was your residence. I led them through the property, showing the cut power line, the emergency backup systems, and finally the security footage. Their professional demeanor could not fully mask their shock at the deliberate nature of the act. The suspect is Barbara Thompson, HOA president, I explained, providing her address and contact information. There is extensive documentation of prior harassment regarding the medical equipment, including written threats of forced compliance measures if we did not remove the necessary medical accommodations. Officer Daniels shook his head in disbelief. This goes well beyond HOA overreach, Commander. This is criminal endangerment at minimum. As they were completing their report, Tyler's pulmonologist arrived, having responded to Maria's call. Dr. Ramirez examined Tyler thoroughly, then documented the potential medical consequences had the backup systems failed. Interruption of ventilator support would have caused respiratory failure within minutes, she stated for the officer's report. Without immediate intervention, this would have been fatal. The deliberate disabling of the primary power source for known life support equipment constitutes a direct threat to patient life. That evening, after ensuring Tyler was stable and additional security measures were in place, I sat at my kitchen table reviewing everything that had transpired. The patrol officers had taken initial statements but had not yet approached Barbara. The district attorney would review the evidence before determining appropriate charges. As a negotiator, I had spent my career resolving conflicts through communication and de-escalation, but this situation had moved beyond negotiation. Barbara Thompson had escalated a neighborhood dispute into attempted murder. Now it was time to respond not as a frustrated homeowner, but as the professional I had spent 15 years becoming. The negotiator in me had tried reason. The parent in me now required justice. Morning briefing at headquarters began at 700 hours. I had arrived 30 minutes earlier, preparing the conference room with case documentation. My team filed in silently, sensing the unusual nature of the meeting. These 12 officers comprised the elite regional SWAT negotiation unit, specialists trained to handle the most volatile situations through strategic communication and psychological tactics. "Thank you for coming in early," I began once everyone was seated. "This briefing concerns a criminal case that directly affects my family, which is why Captain Reynolds will be overseeing operational decisions to prevent conflict of interest." Captain Reynolds nodded from the back of the room as I continued. "Yesterday afternoon, Homeowners Association President Barbara Thompson deliberately cut the power line to my son's ventilator. The act was captured on security footage. The sabotage was part of an escalating pattern of harassment regarding medical accommodations for my son's condition. I displayed the security footage on the main screen, then methodically presented the chronology of events, the documented harassment, escalating threats, and finally the deliberate cutting of the medical power line. The room remained silently focused as I outlined each piece of evidence. "District Attorney Morrison is reviewing the case for formal charges," I explained. "Initial assessment indicates criminal endangerment, reckless conduct creating risk of serious physical injury, and potentially attempted homicide given the deliberate nature of targeting life support equipment. Lieutenant Garcia raised his hand. "Commander, what is your assessment of the subject's current state?" "Barbara Thompson displays narcissistic tendencies and rigid adherence to perceived authority," I answered professionally. "She has demonstrated escalating behavior patterns typical of individuals who prioritize control over safety. She represents a continued threat to my son's welfare and potentially to others who require medical accommodations." Captain Reynolds stepped forward. "To be absolutely clear, Commander Jackson will not be involved in any operational aspects of this case. He is providing background information as the reporting victim. All tactical decisions will come through standard chain of command with my direct oversight." The meeting transitioned to operational planning, with my role shifting to witness rather than commander. The team developed a comprehensive approach that balanced public safety with appropriate force response. Barbara Thompson had no prior criminal record, but the deliberate targeting of life support equipment necessitated treating her as potentially dangerous. At 900 hours, I met with District Attorney Morrison in his office. Security footage played on his monitor as he took detailed notes. "The evidence is unambiguous," Morrison stated, pausing the video at the moment Barbara cut the power line. "The labeled medical warnings, combined with previous documented knowledge of your son's condition, eliminates any claim of ignorance. The deliberate nature of the act, plus the documented pattern of escalation, supports serious charges." "What specifically are you considering?" I asked. "Criminal endangerment, criminal damage to critical medical equipment, and attempted homicide," he replied. "The last charge particularly given her awareness that cutting power to ventilator equipment could result in death." I maintained professional composure. "What about the timeline?" "We will file charges today. Given the nature of the offense and the continued proximity to your residence, we will request immediate arrest rather than summons." Following the meeting with Morrison, I consulted with our department legal team regarding civil action. The department attorney recommended comprehensive documentation of all financial impacts, emergency medical response, equipment inspection and repair, additional security measures, and potential property value impact from the HOA conflict. By afternoon, I had assembled a comprehensive security response. A professional security team installed redundant power systems, enhanced monitoring equipment, and additional cameras covering all approaches to our property. The medical equipment company provided upgraded backup systems with satellite monitoring capabilities. Tyler watched the security installation from his bed, his expression concerned despite my reassurances. "Is this because of the power problem yesterday?" he asked quietly. I sat beside him, choosing honesty appropriate for his age. "Yes, we discovered the power line was deliberately cut by someone who knew it was connected to your equipment. These upgrades ensure it cannot happen again." His eyes widened slightly. "Someone tried to hurt me on purpose." "They tried to damage your equipment," I clarified. "But they will not have another opportunity. We have the best security available now, and the person responsible will face consequences." That evening, my team gathered at my home for final operational planning. Lieutenant Garcia would lead the arrest team with Captain Reynolds overseeing. The operation was scheduled for 600 the following morning, time to minimize neighborhood disruption while ensuring safe apprehension. "Standard arrest protocol," Captain Reynolds confirmed. "No special treatment in either direction. We conduct this exactly according to department guidelines for a subject with no violent history but charged with severe offenses." As they departed, Reynolds remained behind briefly. "Are you doing all right with this, Commander?" I considered the question carefully. I am separating my professional assessment from my personal feelings. The subject presents a documented threat to my child's safety. The evidence supports appropriate legal response. Beyond that, I am focusing on ensuring my son remains safe. Reynolds nodded. "The department stands behind you. This goes beyond HOA overreach into criminal territory. We will handle it by the book." After everyone left, I checked Tyler's equipment one final time before sitting beside his bed. He had fallen asleep, his breathing regulated by the ventilator that kept him alive. The steady rhythm of the machine provided counterpoint to my thoughts as I contemplated the morning operation. Barbara Thompson had severely miscalculated, believing she was targeting a vulnerable family without resources or recourse. By morning, she would understand exactly who she had chosen as an adversary. Dawn broke with muted colors across the suburban landscape. I stood dressed in full tactical uniform, command insignia visible on my collar. The operational briefing had concluded 30 minutes earlier at the Mobile Command Center, positioned 2 blocks from Barbara Thompson's residence. 3 patrol cars and an unmarked tactical vehicle were in position, maintaining communication silence unless necessary. "Alpha Team in position," came Lieutenant Garcia's voice through my earpiece. "Perimeter secured." "Bravo Team ready," reported Sergeant Martinez from the secondary approach position. "Command acknowledges," Captain Reynolds responded from the command vehicle. "Proceed according to protocol. Subject is not known to be armed but approach with standard caution." I remained at the command center, present as the victim's representative rather than operational commander. The body camera feeds displayed on monitors showed multiple angles as officers approached Barbara Thompson's immaculate colonial home. Lieutenant Garcia pressed the doorbell, standing position 2. The side according to standard procedure. 2 officers maintained position behind him, with additional personnel covering alternative exits. Barbara Thompson opened the door dressed in a bathrobe, expression shifting from irritation to confusion at the police presence. "Barbara Thompson," Lieutenant Garcia asked formally. "Yes," she replied, posture stiffening. "What is this about?" "I have a warrant for your arrest," Garcia stated clearly, presenting the document. "You are charged with criminal endangerment, criminal damage to medical equipment, and attempted homicide. Please turn around and place your hands behind your back." Shock registered across her face. "This must be some mistake. I am the HOA president. I have never." "Ma'am, please turn around and place your hands behind your back," Garcia repeated calmly. "The charges relate to your deliberate cutting of medical power lines at the Jackson residence yesterday afternoon." Comprehension dawned visibly on her face, followed immediately by attempted recovery. That was a covenant violation. I was enforcing association rules regarding unauthorized external wiring. The power line was clearly marked as medical equipment supporting life-sustaining devices, Garcia responded without emotion. "Your actions were captured on security footage. Please turn around now." As Garcia secured handcuffs, Barbara's expression shifted from indignation to growing alarm. Neighbors had begun emerging from surrounding homes, watching the scene unfold from driveways and porches. "This is ridiculous," Barbara protested as officers escorted her toward the patrol vehicle. "I am the HOA president. I was enforcing community standards." The planned media presence had stationed themselves at the perimeter of the scene. News cameras captured Barbara's transport to the patrol vehicle, her expression transitioning from authority to uncertain vulnerability. As the patrol car departed with Barbara secured inside, I exited the command vehicle and approached the designated media position. This aspect had been carefully planned with the department public information officer, a brief statement that provided factual information without compromising the case. The reporters recognized me immediately as I approached in full command uniform. "Commander Jackson, can you explain what is happening here this morning?" asked the reporter from Channel 8 News. "The subject has been arrested on charges related to deliberate sabotage of critical medical equipment," I stated formally. "Yesterday afternoon, Barbara Thompson deliberately cut the power supply to a ventilator that keeps my 13-year-old son alive. The act was captured on security footage and witnessed by medical personnel. The district attorney has filed appropriate charges based on the evidence." "Was this related to an HOA dispute?" another reporter asked. "The subject had previously issued multiple demands that we remove medically necessary equipment and power supplies, despite documentation of their life-sustaining nature. When we declined to remove equipment necessary for my son's survival, she took direct action that could have resulted in his death had backup systems not engaged." Barbara Thompson's expression as she looked through the patrol car window captured the exact moment. She connected my professional identity with the homeowner she had targeted. The realization that she had unknowingly challenged not just a parent but a SWAT commander registered visibly in her widening eyes. Neighbors gathered in small groups, conversations animated as they processed the morning's events. Several approached me as I returned to my vehicle. "We had no idea what was happening," one woman stated, distress evident in her voice. "Barbara told the board your modifications violated regulations. She never mentioned they were for medical equipment." "Is your son all right?" asked another neighbor, an elderly man I recognized from community meetings. "He is safe," I assured them. "Our medical systems have redundant backups." As the operational team conducted final debriefing, Captain Reynolds approached me privately. "The arrest was by the book," he confirmed. "No special treatment in either direction. The evidence speaks for itself." I nodded acknowledgement. "Thank you for ensuring proper procedure." By mid-morning, the news had spread throughout the community and across local media. The story of an HOA president deliberately cutting power to a child's ventilator created immediate public response. My professional position added additional dimension to coverage, but the core story, endangering a disabled child over aesthetic concerns, resonated regardless of my occupation. As I drove home, I reflected on the morning's events. The confrontation had not delivered emotional satisfaction. There was no triumph in watching Barbara Thompson's arrest, only the professional certainty that a threat to my son had been neutralized through proper legal channels. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Watkins delivered the sentence. Barbara Thompson stood motionless at the defendant's table, her attorney's hand resting lightly on her arm in silent support. "The court finds the defendant guilty on all counts," Judge Watkins stated firmly. "The deliberate interference with life-sustaining medical equipment, with full knowledge of potential consequences, demonstrates reckless disregard for human life that this court cannot overlook." Barbara received a 5-year sentence with 3 years suspended, mandatory community service with disabled individuals, and permanent restraining orders protecting our family. Her face registered disbelief as deputies escorted her from the courtroom. The HOA bylaws automatically removed convicted felons from board positions, ending her authority in the neighborhood. The emergency HOA meeting following Barbara's arrest revealed the extent of misinformation she had provided to board members. Many expressed shock upon learning the true nature of our medical accommodations. Margaret, the hesitant board member who had provided critical information, was elected interim president. Our first action will be reviewing and revising our accommodation policies for medical needs, Margaret announced to assembled residents. We have consulted with an ADA compliance specialist to ensure our guidelines properly balance community aesthetics with necessary medical accommodations. The community response transformed in the weeks following the incident. Neighbors who had previously avoided interaction now stopped by regularly, offering support and expressing regret for not intervening sooner. Several formed a volunteer emergency response network specifically for medically vulnerable residents. Robert Chen, an electrical engineer living 3 doors down, organized a neighborhood project installing an interconnected backup power grid linking several homes with medical needs to shared generator systems. The project expanded to include emergency communication systems and coordinated response protocols. We should have done this years ago, Robert explained as volunteers installed equipment. Neighborhoods should protect vulnerable members, not target them. Tyler's condition remained stable with the enhanced systems now providing multiple layers of protection. The medical equipment company featured our upgraded setup in training materials, using it as an example of comprehensive home medical safety. 6 months after the incident, I stood before the HOA general meeting, now as a regular member rather than adversary. The events that brought us together were unfortunate, I began, addressing the filled community center. But they have created opportunity for positive change. Today, our neighborhood has become a model for others in accommodating medical needs while maintaining community standards. The emergency preparedness program I had developed with Robert expanded to surrounding neighborhoods. Local medical equipment companies contributed resources, creating a comprehensive support network for ventilator-dependent individuals throughout the region. One evening, as I checked Tyler's equipment before bedtime, he asked a question that caught me by surprise. "Do you think Mrs. Thompson understood what she was really doing?" I considered carefully before answering. "I believe she understood she was cutting power to your equipment. I do not think she fully comprehended what that meant for your safety." He nodded thoughtfully. It is strange that someone could care more about how something looks than whether someone lives. People sometimes lose perspective, I replied. That is why communities need to look out for each other. Through my window, I could see neighbors installing additional solar backup systems for the emergency grid, their flashlights moving methodically in the evening darkness. What had begun as one parent protecting one child had expanded into community-wide resilience. My professional training had prepared me to handle crisis situations, to negotiate when lives hang in balance. But this experience had taught me something new, that sometimes justice requires not just addressing immediate threats, but rebuilding systems that allowed those threats to develop. In protecting my son, we had ultimately strengthened an entire community's understanding of what truly matters.